All right. Good morning. Hold on just one second. As usual, I technical challenges continue to plague me. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing all right. It's a really gloomy day here in beautiful St. Louis, Missouri. Lots of rain. I guess we had a lot of rain last night, or at least this morning. All right, so let's go ahead and kick this off. I thought I'd jump on here just a couple minutes early in case some folks might have a couple of questions before we get started. Maybe you've watched a video previous video, I should say, and maybe you have some questions about something. So feel free. I see we've only got one participant on right now, or someone else just jumped on. So, all right. Yeah. Good morning. It's weird. There used to be that they have this tool, and I use Restream to stream out to all the different platforms. But they used to have a way for me to send you a link, or to put a link in the comments section, and you clicked on that. If you're attending this, you click on that link, and it allows me to see who that actually is. I just don't know where to find that link any longer, so we're gonna have to. If I look at it this way, if you want me to know your name, you'll throw it out there. So, but yeah, that's mostly the Facebook users, because that's a read-only type of platform. It just happens to come through on Restream. All right, so if you guys didn't catch us on Friday, I had myself and my business partner on. We talked about finding cash buyers, and I'm not gonna get too far into or too deep into the woods on that one. I just kind of want to recap that for a quick second. and just really just tell you the importance of having a handful of cash buyers at your disposal. Really, we don't particularly use a ton of cash buyers. I went out and built this massive list. It was a big list. Took me about a year and a half to build it, of constant, you know, constant marketing for cash buyers. When it turned out, I really only needed just a few, just a handful. Um, Primarily, what we do is, and I'm talking about wholesaling here. And I know I rib wholesalers quite a bit, but um, the truth of the matter is they're definitely needed. They definitely serve a purpose, and I'm super grateful for all the wholesalers that certainly have brought me deals. But um, really, cash buyers are they're really kind of easy to find. To be honest with you, it's not that tough to do. It's just are those cash buyers quality cash buyers? So what we normally do, though, since we can get, we have the ability to get creative, and so generally speaking, our buyers come from the MLS. And if you haven't watched that video, go back, jump into the YouTube channel. Don't leave this broadcast right now. But you get a chance, go back and look at the video that we did. It's alive. We did that on last Friday, and it's all about finding cash buyers. Really, today I want to talk a little bit about minimizing risk on buying and selling. So this whole business really revolves around minimizing risk. And so we're going to jump into that here in just a second. Before we actually do that, though, um, if you are watching this on YouTube, I am going to ask if can you just go down below the video, go ahead and click on the subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Help us grow the channel. And then also while you're there, it's just a couple centimeters away. Go ahead and click on the notify bell, or click on the bell. That's what it is. Yeah, I'm on so many different platforms here that sometimes I get it confused. But yeah, click on the bell, and that way every time we you get the deal. Every time we go live, you're going to be notified. So all right, and then lastly, if you haven't checked us out, head on over to sub2empire.com. As many of you may or may not know, we run the Creative Finance Academy over there, and it's a just an excellent way to throw you or kind of get you into the creative mindset and into creative financing. All right, so that being said, and again, we appreciate everyone. We appreciate everyone joining us here. We have this every single Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Set your, create a calendar entry, whatever you got to do. If you just go ahead and subscribe on the YouTube channel, well, then you're going to be notified anyway. So, all right, let's jump into this thing this morning. First, let me pull this up. I'm going to share my screen with you guys here. I've kind of done a little bit of this before, but I'm talking about this particular topic. We've covered this before, but I think it's really important to understand this. And also, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share this with you folks. I'm going to share this mind map in the chat. So let me go ahead and it says I can't post to some channels. Let's do this chat overlay. Here we go. All right, guys, I just posted a link there. That's to the mind map that we're going to be going over here. If you guys want to follow there, if you just want to watch on the screen, it's your pick. Take your pick. But really, title of this particular mind map is how to minimize risk when buying, and then also when selling. And so we have this philosophy in the group with our coaching students as well. And it's really just standard kind of run of the mill, um, still a standard kind of run of the mill philosophy on reducing your risk. All right, so and, and particularly when you're buying, that's when you are most exposed. Everyone's heard the term, you got to buy right, but that doesn't just include paying a good price. That also includes on how you actually take title. So, guys, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth on these screens. So, if you have questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. I'll get to them. I just have to kind of look at my screen while I'm talking here. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? There we go. All right, so you should be able to see that mind map now. So let's walk through this thing. Again, the whole idea here is to, when you hear the term buy right, a lot of people automatically think you got to get it at the lowest price that you possibly can. That's the beauty of creative financing. We don't necessarily have to subscribe to that, to that mantra, to what they're telling us about pricing. Would it be nice to have, ideally you'd love to get into a property with, tons of equity into it. And sometimes it's just not possible. It doesn't mean that you can't make a good living. You can't make good money on real estate. Equity is, having equity in a property might be important to a lot of people, but we really, really focus and concentrate on cash flow. There's an old saying, you've probably heard it before: you can't eat equity. Equity does not pay your bills. So we don't necessarily concern ourselves too much with it. In fact, in a lot of our marketing, we don't. A lot of folks will have they'll have an minimum equity requirement. We don't really have that. We just kind of we float our marketing out there, and as our leads come in the door, we're able to evaluate those deals, and we'll figure out the best exit strategy, the most profitable exit strategy at that point. So we're not stuck in this box. We're not trapped in this one particular exit strategy, and it works out for us. It works out really, really well because obviously there's tons of leads out there that a lot of people would pass on just because they don't have any equity in them. But again, buying right does not necessarily, in our world, it does not necessarily mean you have a ton of equity in the deal. When we talk about buying right, we're talking about how we actually have title conveyed to us. How are we buying the property in a legal sense, right? So anytime I say the word legal, I have to have my disclosure that, I am not an attorney, I'm not a CPA, I'm not really a registered anything. I'm just an investor. So as long as we understand that, we're good to go. All right, so let's jump into this thing. I will touch on the dispo side here and make sure that we're able to follow along. Hey, Miguel, good morning. How are you? All right, so buying right. Again, buying right doesn't necessarily mean you have to have tons of equity in it. Let's talk about conveyance. So if you look on the screen, and let me just blow this up just a touch so people aren't squinting to see this. Let me make sure it looks good on the. Yeah, I think, can everybody see that? If you can see that, okay, give me a thumbs up or just a quick yes in the comments would be great. All right, so on the acquisition side, we have maybe we've already determined that that the deal would it makes sense to buy the deal because it's going to cash flow for us. Let's talk about conveyance. In order, when we talk about creative financing, that's mainly where this owner finance section right here in this mind map is going to come into play. But there are other things that we can do and even creatively, we can do like with conventional financing. Like we can do, if we're getting conventional financing, we can combine certain aspects of creative financing in with conditional or with conventional as well. So let's just talk about this first piece, this owner finance piece. So when we talk about owner finance, we're talking about any situation where the seller is providing some sort of financing. Okay. So, and by the way, I'm going to backtrack just for a quick second. If you see, so from top to bottom, we have owner finance, we have conventional, and we have lease option. All right. These are our order. This is an order of preference. Um, I want to, I don't, maybe preference isn't the best word. When we go down this list, we're talking about owner finance, conventional financing, and lease option. This is not just order of preference. This would be more along the lines of risk management. So, obviously, if we get something owner financed, that doesn't require us to qualify for that financing. That is a little less risky for us because in many cases we can either take a property subject to, we can get seller financing on. I've got a couple buildings that are seller financed, and I didn't qualify for those at all, and so consequently, those don't show up on my credit report. And so for me, that is a little less risky. It doesn't mean I can't be, if I have something that's seller financed or owner financed to me, doesn't mean that I can't be foreclosed on, and that's not going to be public record if something were to happen. God forbid whatever I don't know, for some reason I can't make that payment. It doesn't mean that won't show up eventually in public record or something like that. But it's less legal exposure. It's harder for the public to find you, for people for maybe you got a lawsuit that somebody's has levied against you, and it's just going to be a little bit of a legal hurdle to try and discover who. And again, depending upon how you have that set up, how you have your business entity structured is going to that's going to determine on how easy it is for folks to find you. But I'm getting a little into the weeds. Let's take a look at the owner finance side. So just so you understand, as we go down the list here, we're going from least risky, which would be owner finance, to most risky. That's the way we look at this. Also, once we get into these little subcategories, we're going to go from least risky down to most risky. Okay. Actually, straight owner finance, it's a little bit different category, but let's talk about subject to. All of these strategies, by the way, subject to, mortgage wrap, contract for deed, and just straight owner financing, these are all owner financing strategies. Like these are all methods of owner financing. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, maybe you can get seller financing or subject to. Well, subject to is seller financing. It's a form of seller financing. So I just wanted to be clear on that. But when we buy subject to, what do we mean? We get in a subject to transaction, we are actually going to take title. We're getting legal title. But we are not on the loan. Our names, our entities, our companies are not listed as owners on the loan. All right. So we are not personally guaranteeing them. Our sellers are personally guaranteeing those. So our sellers' names stay on the loan. So let's just think about that for a quick second. If we own the property legally through a deed conveyance, somebody conveys that property to us through a recorded deed. Well, we own that property, but the seller or the borrower, I should say, maybe not the seller, but the borrower's name stays in place. So obviously, for us, that's an ideal situation, right? I mean, that's like It really doesn't get any better than that. We love, love, love subject to. We love it. And so as far as risk goes, this is going to be our least risky way to have property conveyed to us. All right. And that really just means getting the deed, and the seller's loan is going to stay in place, and we just make the payments on that loan. All right. Next on the list, I'm just going to leave that expanded. Next on our list is a mortgage wrap. Let me just check the. There we go. Oh, there's Bill. All right. Hey, Bill, good morning. All right. Okay, so the next on our list is our mortgage wrap. Why do we like mortgage wraps? Well, first, let's explain what it is. On a mortgage wrap, the original or the underlying loan is going to stay in place. All right. So if you have a seller who has a loan on a property, that loan is not going to get paid off. It's kind of like subject to. It's just a little bit. It gets a little more technical when we start talking about mortgage wraps. But we love mortgage wraps because we get to write a brand new loan that is going to wrap the original underlying loan. This also means we get legal title. There's going to be a recorded mortgage or deed of trust, and you're going to get a note. This is like a brand new. You're creating a note. Okay, you are creating a note and a mortgage that is going to wrap the original underlying mortgage. But that means that we get legal title. So we don't mind taking on a mortgage wrap. It does kind of complicate the. It's just a lot going on. It kind of complicates maybe the insurance side of it, which is really not that big of a deal. But for some people, some folks are just not going to understand that. What we do then is we're going to make payments to our seller, right? We're going to make direct payments to our seller. But what we like to do to further reduce our risk is we like to make interest payments to our seller and also make a separate payment to the seller's lender directly. Why do we do that? That's because we want to make sure, especially if we're in a situation, say maybe the seller was behind on their payments. Well, there's a reason that seller's behind on their payments. And so we want to reduce our risk by not giving them that full amount, or not paying them the entire amount on that mortgage. It is to our benefit to go ahead and pay them what they're due on the, as far as their interest is concerned, their principal and interest. But we like to pay our sellers lenders directly. So it's almost like it's a subject to deal where we're paying the lender directly, but instead this is a wrap. And depending upon the terms that are written into your note, that is going to determine how much your seller is going to be making on this mortgage wrap, right? So I hope that's clear. If anybody's unclear about that, please let me know. I'll happily address that. But like I said, now maybe you can see why we just prefer to take something subject to whenever we possibly can, because mortgage wraps, for your average investor, they are probably they're a little advanced. Again, it's not that big of a deal. It's just if you've never been exposed to it before, it might be a little bit of a problem. And of course, we get a deed. So that's the most important part. So in subject to, we get the deed. In a mortgage wrap, we get a deed as well. So two really great ways of having title conveyed to you, or or whatever entity you've chosen. Two great ways, because you get legal title. All right. Subject to, preferred over a mortgage wrap, just because we have the benefits of owning without the risk of a personal guarantee on a loan. In a mortgage wrap, this is a personal guarantee. It's going to be, that's how your note's going to be structured. You're going to personally guarantee this loan. Uh, when I say personally guarantee, I mean that's either going to be you as the individual. I would only recommend you doing that if you're actually going to live in the property, or it's going to be an entity, say an LLC or a trust. Um, though that entity or that trust, and if it's you taking that personal responsibility, it would be you. All right. Clear as mud. Everybody good? All right. Okay, so then let's jump down to one of the more risky ways of taking title, and that is on contract for deed. There's a kind of a I don't know. There's this thing going around on in some of the social media platforms and on YouTube. You'll see some videos about contract for deed, and most people, when they hear contract for deed, by the way, the bond for deed, agreement for deed, contract for sale. That's a recent one I heard. These basically all mean the same thing. What it means is you're only getting equitable title. But a lot of folks, when they hear contract for deed, they think that is a way that they think that that's only a way to sell a property, which they're not wrong about that. It is a great way to disposition a property if you're a buy and hold investor. Like this is exactly what we do. We like to convey equitable title via contract for deed. But you can also buy properties on contract for deed. And a lot of people, I think they dismiss that because a contract for deed only conveys equitable title. It does not convey legal title. And so there's a couple of reasons on the buy side, on the purchase side. If I'm going to go out and purchase property, there are a couple reasons why you might consider buying on contract for deed. And I'll give you a perfect example of why this might benefit you to buy on contract for deed. Again, it's more risky, definitely more risky because you're not getting legal title. But in some cases, it might make sense for you. And the example that I have for you is I'm looking at a very large package of properties. We're talking about, three or four different entities that own multiple doors, lots of doors, right? Well, our seller in that situation, obviously, if we can't perform per our agreement, our seller could lose everything. Our seller could really be in deep trouble if something were to happen to us. Where who knows? Whatever. I can't really think of anything right now. But if something were to happen where we could not perform and make those payments and make the payments to the seller, make the payments to the lender, it's a huge risk for your seller. And so sometimes what we do, and this is what I did in this situation, I made an offer. In my offer, the conveyance was not legal title. It was contract for deed. So the conveyance would have been equitable title to me. Now, a lot of people would think I'm absolutely nuts for doing that. But we did place in that offer, we did place some provisions for, basically we had it's sort of like a probationary period. So the offer that I made was, hey, we'll buy this property on contract for deed. We'll get equitable title. All right. And so for the next 2 years, I will make payments to you based upon the terms of that contract for deed. And then in 2 years, if I've made every single payment on time and, there's no problems, everything has gone smoothly, I would like for you to convey legal title to me as well. So we will convert this contract for deed into it'll just be a seller finance deal. There are underlying mortgages, so we will likely do a mortgage wrap. Everybody good on that? I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about here and what we just did. So I have made an offer, and in that offer, I have agreed to buy this property on contract for these multiple properties. This is a large package. I've agreed to buy that package of properties on contract for deed with the understanding and the a written agreement that if I make payments on that month after month without missing a beat, in 2 years we will convert that into a mortgage wrap, where then I'll be conveyed this entire package via legal means, which would be a recorded mortgage. In our case, it would be a deed of trust and a note. All right. So those are the top three ways in order that we would like to purchase our properties. Again, this is minimal risk, sub two, a little more risk on the mortgage wrap, just because we have the risk on a mortgage wrap where this comes in is really, if you're, like I said, if your seller was in any kind of financial distress or any kind of financial problems prior to this sale, you might want to think about separating out the payments, one payment to your seller for their principal and interest, and then you're paying the mortgage directly, right? But you are getting legal title here. And then lastly is contract for deed. So I do want to talk about free and clear properties. This one's kind of an outlier because this really should be probably stacked below mortgage wrap, but I kind of threw it in here because we do run across these quite often, really. And this is not on free and clear properties. I would, you know what? I probably just need to go ahead and throw this right up here. So, I don't know, in fact, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe the software pushed it down there, but who knows? But on straight, when you have a free and clear property, the whole world opens up to you. There's all kinds of good stuff that you can do on a free and clear property. It's basically you're starting with a clean slate. And so what we end up doing is that we make our offer. We want to get legal title in this situation. We definitely need legal title. You can buy it on contract for deed. That's why this is kind of like an outlier. You can kind of employ both just a straight seller finance where you're getting a note and a deed of trust or a mortgage. It has its own. It is being conveyed to you via legal title. You can also buy free and clear properties on contract for deed. That's why this is kind of these two are kind of. I'm pretty sure that's why I put this one down below contract for deed, because you can really employ a lot of great strategies for acquisition on this. I mean, really, it's an ideal situation when you have a free and clear property. There's just so much possible. So that's the owner finance side. And like I said, with straight owner finance, you can get legal title through a mortgage or deed of trust and a note, or you can also buy free and clear properties on contract for deed. All right. Anybody have any questions? All right. Okay. So that's the owner finance side. When we're talking about mitigating risk, and then we're breaking that down into owner finance. Owner finance is going to be the least risky way for you, no matter how you slice it. It's just a better way to buy. Then we get into conventional, and what I mean by conventional, I don't mean just, say, bank financing. Conventional lending is accomplished or achieved through private money, through institutional money, meaning banks and institutional lending, and hard money. And I call these conventional because it's just your run-of-the-mill type of loan, whether it's hard money or private money. Doesn't really matter. The terms are definitely going to be different, but it is kind of conventional lending where you have a you have a you're going to have a note, you're going to have a recorded mortgage, but the terms of your note are going to be very, very conventional. Whether that's, and they're each going to have their own category. Obviously, we're going to pay more for hard money, right? But it's still in a sense of in this world and in the sense of lending, it's still very conventional for us to go out and get a hard money loan because it has set terms. We don't get to play around with this too much. We might be able to negotiate a better interest rate or something like that, but we don't get to play around with this very much at all. And so on the acquisition side, you can have a private lender that would be considered a conventional loan. We prefer private money anytime we can get it. It's almost always it's almost always cheaper for one. But the terms are, when you're talking about private lenders, the terms is really where the power of private money comes in, because you can get very, very creative with private lending. For example, I'll just give you one example. It might be a little bit advanced, but you've never heard the term walking the mortgage. It is basically it's cross collateralizing property, a property. So basically, what you're doing is you can build into your terms that you want to have you want to be able to cross collateralize different properties. So you can use the terms in your note to say, hey, I would like to walk this mortgage over to another property. Basically, it's known as substitution of collateral. I didn't really want to say that because it can be kind of confusing, but you are substituting the collateral in a note with another piece of property. So let's say that you found this piece of property. You own one. You own a property. You have a private loan on it. But then you go out and you found this other property that you really like. Well, maybe you bring in, maybe you want to take all or a portion of the collateral in the loan that you have with your private lender, but you want to apply it to another property. So I think it's probably substitution of collateral is probably one of the more important provisions that you need to have in if you're dealing with private lenders. Have those in your terms. But getting back to the private lender, the benefits here. I mean, obviously, it's super, super flexible. In most cases, you can, I would look at it this way: if we have a ton of folks out there that are calling themselves private lenders, but they're really not private lenders. It's for the most part, it's either hard money or some sort of really, really rigid restrictions on their lending practices. True private money is acquired through folks that through networking, maybe people that aren't necessarily even in the real estate business, but they're money motivated, right? So you can get super, super flexible with private money, and that's why we love it. So I am not opposed, obviously, to conventional financing through a private lender. You can get super flexible with it. Then we jump down to institutional lending, which, quite honestly, I only put it on here for your benefit. I don't use institutional lending on almost anything. Now, I have had some properties where, I've used like these larger syndicated companies like Kiabi and all those folks. That would fall under the category of institutional lending. That is not a private lender, by the way. The Kiabis of the world, the OCDs, that's not private lending. I don't care what anybody tells you, it's not. They're very, very rigid, very strict. These are the terms. There's no negotiating, and or very little negotiating. But these would also include a portfolio lender. Now, I love portfolio lenders because portfolio lenders, obviously, they lend on the deal. They lend on the portfolio. And so what that means is, yes, they are going to underwrite you. Yes, they're going to be super, super rigid. But kind of generically speaking, they don't have the request. They do not sell their notes. So when you take out a loan with a portfolio lender, they are not going to sell that note on the secondary market. They're actually going to carry. It's their money. Okay, they're going to carry. They're going to carry your loan and not sell that loan off to somebody else. And they're really, really great because the real benefit to portfolio lenders is that they now, while you probably will personally guarantee that loan, but also the loans can be put in your LLC's name, into trust names, and so they're really great to deal with. They're super, super. Besides just the lending side, they're super knowledgeable about the deal. So if you've got a bad deal and they won't lend on it, they'll tell you exactly. I mean, that should tell you exactly everything you need to know about any particular deal. And then, of course, we have bankers or mortgage bankers. I shy away from these folks, but some of you may not, and nevertheless, they are available, and it is conventional financing. These folks are going to be extremely rigid. They're going to be, there's no negotiations, almost never. It's just they have a product, and that's what you buy. I shy away from those. Not to say that at some point in the future we use those, or we use a banker, a bank or a mortgage banker, but we shy away from those. So that's it on institutional lending. Those two categories are pretty much all you've got when it comes to institutional lending. And then we've got hard money. Let me make sure we're good here. We're good. Okay. Then we've got hard money. Hard money is a touchy subject because it's my personal belief that hard money, even though a lot of folks who get into this business, hard money is really designed for new people getting into the business. I say that kind of tongue in cheek because I've used hard money sporadically throughout my entire career here, but hard money is probably the last. It would be my last choice for funding, just because it's so it's just stupid expensive. It's just so incredibly expensive. And it's not that I wouldn't use it. A lot of people will tell you that don't worry about how much it costs you. But if you've got a ton of deals lined up, and you have to borrow hard money to close those deals, it's just that's a real tough pill to swallow for me. That expense, it's just, if it weren't so just absolutely blown up on the expense side, it might make more sense. But I guess my problem is I got so used to the owner finance side and private money that it is super hard for me to go back to hard money. I will tell you a couple of good things about hard money. Hard money lenders are a great resource for knowing whether or not you've got a good deal on your hands. So if you're new, maybe you're new in this business, and you have some questions about your deal, you just don't know if you've got a good deal on your hands, I recommend going out and networking with hard money lenders, because they will tell you, once you run a number by a hard money lender, or once you run your numbers by, they're going to be able to tell you pretty much right away, whether or not you've got a good deal. And they're just an excellent resource for all kinds for not just evaluating your deal, but they're also an excellent resource. Like, they know where to get like the best prices on materials and things like that. If you have to go through a rehab, they're just a really great resource. I found them. I have several hard money lender friends, and I may not necessarily borrow from them. Uh, some of them I do, but a lot of them I just can't. Like I said, I can't stomach that expense. But I will keep in touch with them. I will, go to lunch with them and just kind of pick their brain on their ideas. And really, you got to understand that they're in the trenches. Like they're lending funds. A lot of their funds may come from outside sources, but in many cases, the funds that they lend are their own personal funds. So uh, they have, they have quite a bit of risk. So they're going to make sure that that deal that you have is a good deal. And it's a great resource to have. They're especially helpful if you've got, say you've got a deal that you need to close, and your private lender is getting cold feet or something like that. Hard money lenders are definitely a great way to get your deals funded in those situations. Again, you certainly can't do anything long term with hard money, um, but they might be really really good. Might be super helpful to have that as a resource if if you have something you need to close quick. So, all right, that is conventional. If anybody's got anything on the conventional side, please let me know. Happy to answer that. And then lastly, we have lease options. I'm going to change this right now. We have lease options or lease purchases. So first, let's talk about what the difference is between a lease option and a lease purchase. Now, I want you to remember we are on the acquisition side. So this strategy would be everyone's heard of maybe a master lease option or a lease option. I guess it would be a wrap. I'm not sure exactly what to call it right now, but this is you acquiring the property on a lease option. I'll just tell you right out of the gates, I do not like this at all. There's a lot of moving parts. It's it's complicated. There's even though there's um, even though you're not actually buying the property, there are there are so many things that can happen with this lease option strategy. Let's say you pick up a property, you lease option a property, and the idea is you lease option it with the ability to sublet that property. All right. Now you get your tenant in there, your tenant buyer, and that tenant buyer doesn't work out. But in the meantime, they've trashed the property. It's so common. It is so common. It's unbelievable. There's wear and tear. There's fix up. If your lease option or I'm sorry, your tenant buyer cannot perform, well, now you get to go back to your seller who you have the master lease option with. You get to go back and you know what, I can't buy this, but here you go, here's your property back. Sorry, it's so trashed. I just don't I just That's just one of the reasons. It also, there's just a lot going on with this. It's a lot to manage, there's a lot of mental kind of just it's just strenuous. It's difficult. So I don't recommend people do lease options at all. Nevertheless, it is available to you. But let's quickly talk about what the difference between a lease option and a lease purchase is. Um, Actually, let's see. I'm going to change this to lease option, not lease purchases. When you are buying something, this is a strategy you're thinking about doing. Make sure that when you sign this up, all right, make sure you get an option. Make sure it's on an option. You're signing an option contract. You don't ever want to have to sign a purchase contract. And here's the reason why. An option is it's a unilateral, meaning one way contract. So with a lease option, you have the ability to get out of that deal, right? It's an option. It's called an option for a reason. You have an option to buy it. With a lease purchase, what that is you have a purchase agreement. So now you have a bilateral agreement, and you will have to perform on that, or the penalties could be pretty steep. So that's the difference between lease option and purchase. Lease option, you have the option to buy the property. With a lease purchase, you are locked in. You're locked into buying that property. So basically, what's going to happen here? Let me put this in parentheses. What's going to happen is you're going to lease the property from the seller. You're going to sign a separate option contract to purchase at a later date. In your agreement, you're going to retain the right and the ability to sublet that property out to another tenant buyer. You're going to find a new tenant buyer on terms that will allow you to cash flow that property. So you're basically arbitraging your lease agreement and your new tenant buyer's lease agreement, and you're taking that spread. That's all you're doing. All right, and you can take that spread on monthly cash flow. That can be on the purchase price as well. So there is this ability. Obviously you can make cash flow on it, but you can also build in that your purchase price, your tenant buyer's purchase price, could be higher than yours, and so now you've got a spread on that as well. The idea here, though, is to exercise your option to buy on or before your tenant buyer's option's maturity date. So this will be just prior to your tenant buyer going out and getting qualified, or however they're going to buy it. You're going to exercise that option, and so your tenant buyer is going to exercise their option. And so you can do a double closing here. There's other ways you can do it. You can bring these folks together and just get paid for bringing them together. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but you understand the logistics behind this. It can get pretty crazy, and that's why it's a huge headache, if you ask me. So I wouldn't recommend doing it at all. Nevertheless, it is available to you if you choose to go down this path. All right. So that's really it on the acquisition side. It's I just kind of recap this a little bit on owner finance. I mean, there's all kinds of different strategies with owner finance. We have subject to, we have free and clear properties. We can buy on contract for deed. All of these are forms of owner financing or seller financing, kind of one and the same. We always prefer seller financing, no matter what. I mean, the terms are better. The name of the game here is terms. The terms are almost always better in some kind of seller financing situation. And then we have conventional, which is going to be your private money lenders, your institutional lenders, and your hard money. And again, I say this is conventional just because there is, in many cases, there's qualification and and underwriting and all this. Maybe not with hard money lenders, but it's still that the terms are generally speaking pretty rigid. And then we have lease options. Again, I'm not going to recommend it, but if you want to do it, go for it. But I just don't. I think it's very, very the details and the kind of the gears that are turning there are it's just not worth it to me. I don't care for it. On top of that, I don't really like being a landlord. And despite what anybody tells you, lease options, if you're lease optioning a property and then you turn around and subletting that to another tenant buyer, you, believe it or not, are still a landlord. I don't care what anybody tells you, you're still a landlord. And if that's not your thing, then I certainly wouldn't use this strategy. All right, so real quick, anybody have any questions on that? All right, we've got someone, a property under contract sub 2 in Texas with an FHA loan. Title company is saying that it can't be bought sub 2. Is there a way around that? Should I use a local attorney? That's a really, really good question. So first of all, we buy tons of properties with FHA loans. You can definitely buy properties with FHA loans. It's not illegal. It's not illegal to do. Now, it's against their policy. I will tell you that. It's not, but it's not illegal to do. So, um, so I would probably tell you here to keep searching for title companies and see a local attorney. I don't know. I just have this thing about attorneys. I really like to keep them out of my life, like for. But there are definitely good attorneys out there. I just don't particularly care for involving an attorney unless I have to. But I don't think you need to involve an attorney here. I think you probably just got the wrong title company. I own property right now for sure with FHA loans on it. I own property with VA loans on it, and it's not that. Again, it's not that. It's just a policy. It's a policy restriction. All right, but if you're going to take a property subject to, then as long as you're making those payments, you're going to be just fine. That's where people run into trouble. If you're not willing to make those payments, yeah, there are a list of attorneys that are investor friendly online. Now, I think Texas is one of those states where you can use either or, right? Maybe you can answer that for me. I think you can use a closing attorney or a title company. I may be wrong about that. I will tell you the deals that we've done in Texas have all been with a title company. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to use an attorney there or if you can use an attorney there. But anyway, yeah, I would say honestly, you just got the wrong title company. I'll give you kind of a little bit. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of. You're wholesaling the deal. You're wholesaling the subject to deal. Texas definitely is funny on creative deals. Yes. All right. So if you're wholesaling a creative deal, here's what I would recommend. I would recommend you don't. All right. I would recommend that you get really, really familiar with novation, because when you wholesale a creative deal, and maybe you're doing this, I don't know. Maybe maybe you've already got the novation thing. Maybe you got it. Maybe you've already got that in process. When you wholesale a creative deal, if you assign it, I think you have to understand that in that assignment, you are solely responsible to that seller for that deal. All right. So, unless even if you're above board, even if everything's transparent with your seller, if your seller knows that you're going to be wholesaling that, you're going to be packaging up this creative deal. You're going to be maybe it's a subject to deal. You didn't really say what it was, but regardless, if it's a creative deal where there's any form of seller financing, if you're going to package that up and sell that off to someone, well, guess what? You are still on the hook, both legally and ethically. You are still on the hook to make those payments. You're the one that's promised to make those payments to your seller. So I would recommend, if you really want to step out of it, if you really want to protect yourself here, you need to really look into novations. Because with a novation, I kind of I have this little thing, and this is how I remember this. This is how when I learned about novations, this is how I remembered what novation really means. In novation, we have the emphasis is on the N and the V, novation, right? You could definitely use a seller disclosure statement. That doesn't remove your liability, though. All right. I just want you to understand this. If you package that, if you sell that deal off to someone else, what happens when your buyer hits a roadblock somewhere down the road, right? They get in some financial trouble. What's going to happen? I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen because I've seen it a million times. That person, your buyer, what are the first things that buyer is going to stop paying if they run into financial trouble? It's going to be that the items or the obligations that they have, but that their name is not attached to. So if you're selling a subject to deal to your buyer, and all of a sudden they can no longer make those payments, chances are, not saying this is the case every time, but chances are they're going to stop paying on things that their name that they have not personally guaranteed. And so what that's going to end up doing is that's going to put you and your business at risk, because your seller, you've made the promise to your seller. Your seller is going to go, well, you told me this would work out. You told me that this was, that your whoever you're selling this to is going to be able to make these payments. And I'm telling you, it's super, super dangerous. And there is a much easier way to get around this, and that is through novation. Understand what a novation, in its most pure and basic form. Novation. Oh yeah, I was gonna tell you this. This is how I remember this. So novation, you have an emphasis on the N and the V. Novation, right? The way that I remember is this. I think of it as null and void. And in fact, novation may be like Latin for those terms. I really don't know. But what you're doing with a novation is you are stepping. You have this contract with your seller. And what you might say to your seller is, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I'm not sure that this deal is going to work for me, but I have talked with somebody who is really interested in this deal. And so what I would like to do is I would like to remove myself from this deal and put you in touch with this buyer, right? And so what you do is you novate, or you void that original contract. You then change the terms. You write a new contract and you change those terms in that contract. Basically, the new contract is kind of a mirror of the old one, except you're changing the terms. In this case, it would be who the buyer is, and you are completely removing yourself from that deal. You're telling the seller, hey, I'm out. Like I can't close on this. I don't want to close on this. Here's your buyer. And so the way you get paid from that is by you get paid from your buyer, preferably up front. So I want you to understand that you should probably go out and really, really research that. Assignments on top of that. Well, I'm not going to get into that. A lot of states these days. I mean, we've got 14 states with rules on the books about wholesaling. So I think it's coming. I think there's going to be more and more of these states are going to start interjecting into some of these real estate deals, and it's just because we've had a lot of bad actors out there that are not operating above board, and so really novation is a really good way of just removing all that risk that you have. And you get out of the deal, you sell it to you sell that deal to your buyer, and there's you just don't have the recourse that you would have as if you were doing an assignment. All right, so check that out. We may do so we're doing not only these lives on Sunday morning, we're doing Friday morning lives as well, and that may be a topic of discussion for us there. All right. Yeah, you got it, man. All right, so let's jump back into our mind map here. We've covered the acquisition side. We're talking least risky to most risky. All right. Guess what we're going to do on the disposition side? What we're going to do is turn that model upside down. Right? When we dispo a property, we want to have as little legal consequences on the dispo side as we did on the acquisition side. And so what does that mean? All it means is that instead of us giving legal title, if we're going to be seller financing or selling this deal, on seller financing, instead of us giving legal title to our buyer, we're going to give them equitable title only. And the reason that we do this, the reason that this is the model that we've adopted, and I absolutely love it. The reason that we do this is because if I give equitable title, it is going to be next to impossible for my buyer that I have brought in and conveyed on contract for deed. It's going to be next to impossible for my buyer to further encumber that property. Meaning, my buyer is not going to be able to leverage that property or pull any kind of equity out of that property without first getting legal title. Okay, so that is the primary reason why we love contract for deed. If I had to go out and foreclose or take a property back that I have conveyed on contract for deed, I don't want, if I take that property back, I don't want to have a bunch of liens attached to it. And contract for deed really prevents my buyer from being able to put any, like I say, encumber that property in any way, leverage that property, pull money out of it, or pull equity out of it. They're not going to be able to do it. It's just not going to happen. All right. So that's why we love to sell on contract for deed. Also, with contract for deed, it is a private contract. So I'm not going to get into too much, dig too far down into it, but they are a little bit easier in the world of seller finance. They are a little bit easier to take a property back, just a little bit. That has its own challenges as well. Something we can talk about on another video. But we love conveying on contract for deed because it only conveys equitable title and not legal title. All right. And then second in line for us is a mortgage wrap. This is going to convey, let me make sure. Yeah. With a mortgage wrap, we are going to give both legal and equitable title. Just like on the acquisition side, if we buy this way, we get legal and equitable title. Well, I'm selling this on seller financing, so I'm going to convey both legal and equitable title. All right. It's not that I wouldn't do this. And in fact, in Texas, this is very, very common. If our Texas person is still on here, it's very, very common in Texas for folks to do mortgage wraps because contract for deed and of course lease option as well. They're not illegal in Texas, but they are virtually impossible to implement. Okay, so this is very common for folks in Texas. If you are seller financing a property to someone, chances are you're probably going to be doing a mortgage wrap. We have, for Texas specific stuff, we have a different way of doing that is just as effective, but much, much cleaner than a mortgage wrap. A mortgage wrap, again, on the dispo side, if we're selling a property with a mortgage wrap, there can be, even amongst the professionals in this business, there can be a lot of moving parts and you're going to have to be working with the right people to do it. Totally doable. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, really. But it's just not as preferred as contract for deed, just because of the fact that we're giving legal title. All right, so your buyer can technically go out and leverage that property. So that's not something that we really want. If we had to foreclose on that property, guess what? We're going to take back all of that, that debt that they've put on that property. So we prefer not to do that. And then, of course, we have our lease options. Again, it's a simple. Once you have a lease option contract, once you have an option contract on a property, and a lease in place, which are two separate documents that should never reference one another or coincide in the terms in any way, because a court is likely going to look at that as an equity building type of activity. So this is another reason why I don't care for these so much. It's just the negatives stack up when it comes to lease options. They're just not as, they may be profitable, but there's a lot of gears turning, like I said. But all you're doing here really is you're going out and finding a tenant buyer, and you're going to vet those folks the way that you would vet any other buyer or a tenant, really. Um, but what's happening is you are relying on them to perform. And in fact, I would recommend. I'm going to change this. I would recommend that instead of doing a lease option here, I would recommend that you write a lease purchase. This is going to be that bilateral contract between yourself and your buyer. All right, and they are going to have to perform if you have it's a pre-signed or an upfront purchase agreement that has a closing date set out 12 or 24 months, however long your lease is for. What that does is, like I said, it's a bilateral contract at that point. Each party is going to have to perform. So you have a lease option on the acquisition side, and then on the disposition side, you have a lease purchase agreement. Hope that makes sense. Everybody good here? Question here: for substitution of collateral or first right of refusal type terms, does this need to go in the purchase agreement or only in the note? This is in the note. It doesn't exist if it's in the purchase agreement. It only exists if this is in the actually, it's referenced in the recorded mortgage as well. So yeah, I mean, it can be. It sounds maybe a little tricky, but it's not bad. It's just and quite frankly, we don't use it that often, but man, is it a great tool. It is a really great tool. But to answer your question, it is in the mortgage. Okay, it's not in your purchase agreement. Your purchase agreement expires. Your mortgage. Well, let me take this back. Your purchase agreement expires relatively quickly. Your mortgage doesn't. You have generally you might have a balloon on it, so it might be 10, 15 years down the road. All right, so all right, there we go. Answer your question. Hope you're good. All right, what else have we got here? And then, of course, on dispo side, in well, this isn't actually in order, but then we have our rentals, our flips, and our wholesales. So yeah, that's really it, guys. If you didn't get that memo, there's a link in the stream here. In fact, I'll go ahead and plug it again. You guys can have a copy of this. You guys can download a copy of this, or this is just a link directly to this mind map. But that's it. That's really it. Again, the idea here is to get into a deal with as little risk as possible and get out of it with as little risk as possible. And all we're doing is we're taking our acquisition strategies, and for disposition, we are flipping them upside down. Obviously, we would love to have the best position in both the acquisition side and the dispo side. All right, guys. Post any questions in the chat there. If you've got anything, I'm happy to answer them. I'll give you just a second here while I stop sharing and shut everything down. All right. All right, guys. If we have no questions, I'm going to go ahead and end it. One last chance here. All right, guys. Before I do, I'd invite you to head on over to Sub2 Empire. Oh, that's a really great question. Last minute question here. How do you keep deals coming in? Man, that is boy, that's a tough one. The question is, where are you at in your journey? That's the real That's the real question, because at this point in my career, truth be told, I haven't had to really market for a deal in quite a while, meaning active, like, sending out mail. But I've been I was a big Google Ads guy for the longest time. Did tons of deals off of Google Ads. That got really saturated and super expensive. And I'm not opposed to spending money on stuff like that. It's just uh, it got to a point where I was spending $7,000-8,000 in, in in ads on Google, and yeah, I know I was really spending that much. And that was per deal. That was per deal. So I had to scale that back. It just became, like I said, the that whole strategy became super saturated, and I wasn't able to. It just got to a point where it just got too expensive. Um, so I ran Google Ads. I did uh, lots of direct mail, tons and tons of direct mail. I never got into cold calling, just because I always looked at cold calling as kind of the flavor of the month, and the writing was on the wall on that several years ago about how that was going to turn out. Now, there's a ton of people that made a lot of money cold calling. Don't get me wrong. I don't, it's just something it's just a strategy we never did. We stuck with what we knew worked. More importantly, we stuck with what we knew we could do, repeat over a long period of time, and it turned out to be the better strategy for us. You're tired of wholesale, is that correct? It says tried, but I think you mean tired. Yeah, um, yeah. I mean, I think wholesalers. I've said this many times. I think they have their place for sure. I buy from a ton of wholesalers, and I really, honestly, it's really all about what your end goal is for me. And I've had this discussion with several folks, but what is you really got to step back and ask yourself, like, what is your real goal here? Why are we doing this? Why are we we're out here toiling around, and like, what is the goal? When somebody tells me, in fact, I was sitting with there's a guy in my market, really good dude. It's my wife's broker. He's a great guy, but he has these little, like, guys night out get together things. And so we're just kind of sitting around. It's like 7 or 8 guys sitting there. We're just kind of sitting around and talking, enjoying ourselves. And we start talking real estate, and I asked a lot of these guys, like, what is your goal? What do you want to do? And I'm not kidding you. Every single one of them answered with this really short term type of goal. It was, I wanted to have this many deals done. I want to have, this many, whatever. Like, I want to spend, I want to have this much revenue. But I'm like, I get that. I understand that. But what is more, maybe not your goal, but what is your vision? Like, why are we doing this? And so really what I'm getting at is that if you have a vision, if you have an idea about, there you go, I want to be free from the rat race. The money counts, but I enjoy time with my family. See, now that is now I would encourage you to maybe to go out and get even deeper, like get even more granular at that, because literally every time, if I'm going to be out marketing for something, I need to know that I'm not just doing it just as procedure, as just, this is what everybody else is doing, um, there has to be a purpose behind it. And so so the idea here is, when I ask you what your vision is, it's to get you to understand that if your vision is passive income, and it's to spend more time with your family, go on vacations, or maybe you have a somewhere that you'd like to. For me, I have someplace I'd like to live, someplace I'd like to be. And so the idea is to envision that, and then build your marketing around that. So for me, if I want passive income, I know I need the passive income to be able to live out my vision. Then there's no reason for me to be marketing like a wholesaler. It doesn't make any sense. Why would I go out and spend all that money and do that when I can just buy from wholesalers? I can make them rich, and I can also achieve the goal that I am that I've set. So there you go. Bill's right on. I want to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. That's right. Yeah. So that's how I would. That's the first question you need to ask when you're talking about marketing. You need to be real with yourself and really have a vision in mind. If you need cash reserves, right? A lot of people that get into wholesaling, that's the reason they do it, because they need cash reserves. They need money now, and wholesaling is probably the best way to do that. It's probably the fastest way to get that done. Not so surface level, yeah. So anyway, that's where I would challenge you to that's what I would challenge you to look into first. Is what do you want? Like where do you want to take this? And if you have maybe another business, this is a side hustle or something, you might not have the same marketing strategies. But wholesaling is a tough business, man. It is a really tough business. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Anything else? Anybody have anything else? All right. Let me remind you real quick. Every Sunday morning, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this chat here. Every Sunday morning, we have these at 9 a.m. sharp every single Sunday morning. And then, obviously, if if you guys are looking for some help with any of this stuff, go check us out over at Sub2 Empire. Happy to see if we can help you. Also, again, if you're on YouTube, or even if you're in a bunch of these other, like Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, we're broadcasting to all those right now. But if you guys would go check out our YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, folks, that's going to be it for me. Appreciate it. Take care. You all have a great Sunday. We will see you next Friday when we're going to do another live. We don't know what the topic is just yet, but we will be doing another live next Friday. Hope to see you there. Take care, everyone.